Hi, welcome to this video guide tutorial on how to paint this beautiful brown bear. Here I will show you all the steps so you can visualize everything for your own bear. This one has already been primed black. If you have your own and it's not primed, I used Vallejo Surface Primer through the airbrush. However, you can also either brush it on or use a black spray can primer instead. We are going to be using a lot of dry brushing today. For information on dry brushing, please check out the dry brushing PDF guide on my Patreon. To start, I'm using German Black Brown by Vallejo. You want to be using quite a large fluffy brush to get as much surface area covered as possible. Using circular and flicking motions all over the model, I'm going against the direction of the fur to hit the edges. Next, I'm using Dark Rust by Vallejo. Again, using wide movements, making sure to hit the edges of the fur. Just from those two colours, you can already start to see it turning brown, especially on the edges of the fur. Next, I'm using Chocolate Brown by Vallejo, starting to focus a little more towards the face, neck, chest, and legs. This completes the sort of shadow browns you want. I recommend looking at reference pictures of bears to get an idea where the tone of the fur changes across the body. To start going lighter, I'm using Light Rust by Vallejo and flicking it in the opposite direction to the fur to hit the edges. As you go lighter, make sure to reduce the amount of pressure you use. This will affect the intensity of the colour as well as how it applies. Heavy pressure usually leads to more scratchy, chalkiness, whereas lighter pressure is much softer. Next, I'm using Orange Brown by Vallejo again, focusing the most on the neck, stomach and legs. For the face and tummy, I'm using Pale Flesh by Vallejo, making sure to go in the direction of where you want the colour to be strongest, flicking out to be softer and blend into the rest of the neck and body. I'm using Silver Grey on top on the tip of the nose, however it is very pigmented and was laid on a little too thick. To counteract this, I did a light coating of chocolate brown over the top, something medium and neutral to decrease the intensity a little. And this is the fur complete. To work on the detail of the face, I'm using German Black Brown to paint over the nose. You can see in my base coating PDF guide how to thin your paints. I'm also using this for the claws as well. Now the eyes can be tricky. I recommend using a sable brush as you normally get a much finer tip. And as the belly of the brush is wider, you can usually hold more liquid in there, thus preventing your paint from drying out before you get to the bit you're trying to cover. A tip for smaller areas is to use as light pressure as possible. The less pressure you use, the less the bristles bend, meaning you're able to achieve a finer point. I'm using Orange Brown by Vallejo for this. Now for the pupils of the eye, you can absolutely use a regular paintbrush. However, I recommend using a fine liner, as it gives you much more control and is much easier to get a perfect circle. I use a 0.03 size for this. For the gums of the mouth, I'm using Old Rose by Vallejo. Again, using light pressure and angling my brush so I'm using more of the flat side rather than the point. For the teeth, I'm using Silver Grey with the side of my brush. Once everything is done, I'm going over the teeth, nose and eyes with Agrex Earthshade. Shades have a glossy finish, so not only can it create a great contrast and tint the appropriate places, it can also give you a wet effect. If you don't want this finish, you can go over it with a matte varnish. And there you have it. A completed tabletop standard grizzly bear, ready to take on adventurers in your next D&D session. I hope this tutorial was useful, and happy playing!